Hello again, this is Sonia. Today, I will tell you a story about betrayal and a painful divorce, and how one woman found strength and love within herself to rise above it all. Let's begin. Evelyn had always prided herself on being observant, on knowing when something was off. But when she first noticed the changes in Alan, she dismissed them. He had been working late more often, brushing off her questions with vague excuses about business meetings and client dinners. She believed him, because the alternative, that he might be lying, was too painful to consider. It wasn't until that evening, 6 months ago, when everything changed. She had gone out to dinner with a few friends and, on her way home, decided to surprise Alan by swinging by his office. As she approached the building, she saw him standing outside, laughing, with a woman she didn't recognize. The woman was younger, much younger, with flowing dark hair and a figure that drew the eye. They were standing too close. The way he touched her arm, the way they looked at each other, it was unmistakable. Her heart stopped. For a moment, Evelyn wanted to walk right up to them, demanding an explanation. But her feet wouldn't move. Instead, she stood frozen in place, watching the scene unfold like a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. She watched as Alan leaned in, brushing his lips against the woman's cheek before they disappeared together into the night. Evelyn felt the weight of betrayal crushing her chest, but even then, she couldn't bring herself to confront him. When she got home that night, she cried quietly in the bathroom, gripping the edges of the sink until her knuckles turned white. The thought of losing her husband, the man she had built a life with, was unbearable. More than that, the idea of tearing their family apart, what it would do to their children, was more than she could handle. So she made a decision: she would keep this to herself. She convinced herself that it was a one-time thing, a mistake. Maybe Alan would come to his senses, end whatever fling this was, and things would go back to the way they were. Evelyn threw herself into keeping their lives running smoothly, making sure the kids were happy, the house was perfect, and that she was the loving wife he had always known. She was determined to hold on to the life they had built together, no matter the cost. But Alan didn't change. He became more distant, more cold. There were more late nights, more business trips, and fewer moments shared between them. He never knew that she knew, and Evelyn never let on that she was aware. It was her secret to bear, the price she paid to keep her family intact. Then, one evening, everything fell apart. Alan came home late, as usual, but there was something different in the air. He barely acknowledged her as he walked through the door, his face set in a hard, unreadable expression. "We need to talk," he said, his voice lacking the warmth it once held. A cold chill ran down Evelyn's spine. She knew something was coming, but still, she wasn't prepared for what came next. They sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where they had shared so many meals, where they had once laughed and planned their future together. Alan was quiet for a long time, and the silence stretched between them like a chasm. "I want a divorce," he said finally, his voice flat and emotionless. Evelyn felt the ground beneath her shift. The air seemed to leave the room, and for a moment, she thought she might faint. She had known this was a possibility, she had seen the signs, after all, but hearing the words out loud was like being struck by lightning. She couldn't speak, couldn't move. When she finally found her voice, it was shaky, desperate. "Alan, no. We can work this out. We can fix this." But his mind was made up. He wasn't interested in fixing anything. He was already gone, mentally and emotionally. And the most crushing part of it all? He didn't even bother to deny the affair when she brought it up, for the first time, in that moment of desperation. He didn't apologize, didn't show an ounce of regret. "We'll tell the kids together," he said, as if it were a simple business transaction. A few days later, they sat their children down. Their reactions were exactly what Evelyn had feared. They didn't take it well. Their son, barely holding back tears, demanded to know why. Their daughter stared at Alan in disbelief, asking over and over, "Why would you leave us?" Evelyn sat there, her heart breaking, feeling like she had failed them. From that moment, things spiraled. Alan wanted the divorce to be quick and clean. He wanted everything: the house, the cars, the vacation home. The only thing he didn't fight for was the children. He made it clear he wanted a fresh start, without the responsibility of family. It was as if he was erasing their entire life together, piece by piece, leaving Evelyn to pick up the shattered remains. The legal battle that followed was brutal. Alan's lawyer was aggressive, demanding far more than Evelyn ever expected. He wanted to strip her of everything, leaving her with little more than the kids and whatever dignity she could hold on to. Through it all, Evelyn kept her silence about the affair. She could have used it against him, could have exposed him for what he was, but she couldn't bring herself to do it, not for the kids, not for the life they had once shared. But as the divorce dragged on, she began to wonder if her silence was a mistake. Should she have fought back harder? Should she have exposed the truth from the beginning? Evelyn sat at the edge of the bed, staring out the window, the city lights blurred through the tears in her eyes. Her mind was a whirlwind of pain and confusion, replaying every moment, every sign she had overlooked, every lie she had chosen to believe. The man she loved, the father of her children, had shattered the life they had built, yet she still found herself holding onto the pieces, trying to make sense of it all. The divorce proceedings started with a cold formality that stung her deeply. Alan, once so warm and caring, was now a stranger across the room, his eyes hard, his words sharper than ever. He made no attempt to soften the blows. The demands came swiftly. He wanted the house, the cars, the accounts they had built together. But the most painful blow wasn't the material loss, it was the fact that he didn't want the kids. He wanted to be free, untethered by the responsibilities of fatherhood. Evelyn had stayed silent about the affair, hoping, praying, that some part of the man she had married still existed beneath this cold exterior. She believed, even now, that if she kept quiet, didn't retaliate, he might come to his senses and realize what he was giving up. But that hope was fading with every passing day. Their first court hearing was nothing short of brutal. Alan's lawyer, a slick-talking man with no empathy in his eyes, launched into a series of accusations. He painted Evelyn as an incapable wife, someone who had lived off Alan's hard work without contributing to their success. The narrative was twisted and cruel, ignoring the years she had spent supporting him, building their home, and raising their children. Evelyn sat there, her fists clenched beneath the table, her heart racing with anger and disbelief. Alan, sitting across from her, didn't even flinch. It was as if the years they had spent together, the life they had shared, meant nothing to him now. She could see the smugness in his lawyer's eyes, the confidence that they would win, that they would strip her of everything. But she wasn't as weak as they thought. As the weeks dragged on, Evelyn found her strength in the very place she had been afraid to look, herself. For so long, she had been defined by her role as Alan's wife, the mother of their children, the woman behind the man. But now, standing at the edge of losing everything, she realized she had something they couldn't take from her, her dignity. Her lawyer, a kind but fierce woman named Rebecca, encouraged her to speak out about the affair, to use it as leverage. But Evelyn hesitated. It wasn't just about protecting Alan, it was about protecting her children from the ugly truth. They still saw their father as a hero, someone who had always been there for them. Exposing the affair would destroy that image, and as much as she hated him for what he had done, she wasn't ready to shatter her children's world any more than it already had been. Still, Alan's cruelty knew no bounds. He pushed harder, trying to strip her of the vacation home, the one place where Evelyn had found peace in their chaotic life. The home she had lovingly restored, where their children had played on the beach, where they had once spent long, lazy summers. The thought of him taking that from her, from their children, enraged her. One afternoon, during a particularly tense meeting between the lawyers, Alan finally broke his silence. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, and said with a smirk, "You should have known this would happen, Evelyn. I've been checked out for years." The words hit her like a freight train. Evelyn had spent months burying her pain, but hearing him admit it so casually, as if their marriage had been nothing more than an inconvenience, made something snap inside her. For the first time since this nightmare began, she felt a surge of anger that she hadn't allowed herself to feel before. "Checked out," she repeated, her voice shaking with both rage and heartbreak. "So, when you were checking out, was that before or after you started sleeping with her?" The room went silent. Alan's lawyer shifted uncomfortably, but Alan didn't flinch. He didn't even deny it. In that moment, Evelyn realized something. There was no saving him. There was no saving this marriage. Her silence had been her way of protecting the family, but now, it felt like chains holding her back. She had given him everything, her love, her trust, her loyalty, and he had thrown it all away for a woman half her age. From that day forward, Evelyn fought differently. She wasn't the meek wife hoping to save what couldn't be saved. She was fighting for herself, for her children, for the life they deserved. She no longer cared about protecting Alan's reputation. She brought the affair into the open, and once it was out, it changed everything. Alan's image, carefully crafted over years as a family man and successful businessman, began to crack. Friends who had once supported him turned away. His lawyer, once so confident, now had to scramble to salvage what was left of their case. The judge, who had been sympathetic to Alan's requests, now saw him for what he truly was, a man willing to discard his family for his own selfish desires. Evelyn's strength grew with every court session, every victory, small though they might have been. She was no longer just reacting to the punches, she was fighting back. The courtroom became a battleground, and the facade of civility quickly crumbled. Every day brought a new attack, a fresh wound that deepened the already gaping chasm between them. Alan's legal team, clearly on the offensive, launched a full frontal assault on every aspect of Evelyn's life. They tried to paint her as unfit, undeserving, and dependent. It was brutal. Evelyn's hands would grip the armrests of her chair during those hearings, her knuckles white, trying to hold herself together as they dissected her life with surgical precision. Alan's lawyer was relentless, digging into her personal expenses, her social circles, even her parenting. He claimed she had been reckless with money, pointing to every shopping trip, every expensive dinner, and painting her as a frivolous spender. "She's nothing more than a trophy wife," Alan's lawyer declared one day, his voice filled with venom as he laid out his case. "A woman who has contributed nothing of substance to the marriage beyond the ability to spend her husband's hard-earned money." Evelyn's lawyer, Rebecca, immediately objected, but the damage was done. The words lingered in the air, hanging over Evelyn like a storm cloud. She sat there, outwardly calm but seething inside. Alan was willing to tear her apart in public just to get his way. He had turned their life, their love, into ammunition, and the court into his personal battlefield. But Evelyn was no longer the woman she had been at the start of this nightmare. She wasn't going to take this lying down. Her voice, quiet but steady, cut through the tense silence after the outburst. "Is that how you see me, Alan? A trophy?" Her gaze was locked on him from across the room. His lawyer shifted uncomfortably, but Alan, always the picture of arrogance, met her eyes with a cold stare. "You were happy to live that life, Evelyn," he said, his tone dismissive, as if they were discussing a minor inconvenience rather than the destruction of their entire marriage. "You never complained when the money was rolling in." The tension in the room was palpable. The judge, who had up until this point remained impassive, leaned forward slightly, watching the interaction with keen interest. Evelyn took a deep breath, the air in the room heavy with unspoken truths. "You're right," she replied, her voice tight but controlled. I never complained because I believed we were building something together. I supported you. I was there every step of the way while you built your career, your name. But I guess that's all I was to you, a convenient accessory." Her words hung in the air, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of something in Alan's eyes, guilt, maybe, or recognition of the truth. But it was gone just as quickly as it had appeared. He turned his attention back to his lawyer, signaling the conversation was over. But it wasn't over. Not for Evelyn. The next few weeks were nothing short of warfare. Alan's team continued to dig up every piece of dirt they could find, twisting the narrative to suit their agenda. They tried to paint her as a negligent mother, going so far as to suggest that she had used the children as pawns, emotionally manipulating them to turn against their father. They brought in character witnesses, former friends, and even a few family members who testified to how detached she had become in the later years of their marriage. Evelyn could feel the weight of the accusations, each one like a punch to the gut, but she refused to be broken. Every session was a fight for her dignity, her future, and the future of her children. It got uglier. One day, as Alan's lawyer rattled off a list of supposed indiscretions, Evelyn's lawyer, Rebecca, finally stood up with a folder in her hand. It was time to shift the narrative. "Your Honor," Rebecca began, her voice firm and unwavering, "I'd like to submit evidence that will provide the court with a more complete picture of Mr. Whitman's behavior over the past year." The room grew still. Alan's face paled for the first time since the divorce began, a crack in his armor. Rebecca handed the judge the folder, and the courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Inside were photos, bank records, and receipts that detailed the affair Alan had tried so desperately to hide. The fancy dinners, the lavish gifts, the vacations, all with the younger woman who had been the catalyst for this entire nightmare. Alan's lawyer immediately objected, but the judge allowed the evidence. When those photos were projected onto the screen for the court to see, the images of Alan holding hands with his mistress on a tropical beach, smiling without a care in the world, the tension broke. There was no denying it now. The affair, the lies, the betrayal, it was all out in the open. And it was damning. Alan's lawyer scrambled to regain control, but the damage had been done. For the first time, Alan looked vulnerable, exposed. He sat in his chair, his jaw clenched, as his life unraveled in front of him. His clean image, his perfect persona, was gone. The court now saw him for what he truly was, a man who had not only betrayed his wife but had tried to destroy her in the process. Evelyn watched as Alan's empire began to crumble, but the victory didn't bring her the satisfaction she thought it would. The war had left her scarred, exhausted, and barely able to recognize the life she once cherished. But one thing was clear, she wasn't going to let him take everything. Not now. Not ever. Evelyn had never wanted a war, but war was exactly what she got. And now, for the first time in months, she felt the tides turn in her favor. The courtroom had shifted from a battleground to a stage where the truth could finally be revealed. Alan's empire of lies, meticulously built over the years, was collapsing in real time. His polished image, the successful businessman, the doting father, the devoted husband, was shattered, and Evelyn was done protecting him. The courtroom buzzed with whispers as the damning evidence continued to roll out. Alan's secret accounts, money funneled into luxury vacations with his mistress, and gifts that he had charged to their shared accounts without a second thought. It wasn't just the affair that appalled the court, it was his arrogance, the sheer audacity with which he had tried to destroy Evelyn while living a double life. Rebecca, Evelyn's lawyer, had done her homework. She didn't just present the affair as a moral failing, she tied it directly to their financial situation. She showed how Alan had spent exorbitant sums of money on his mistress, depleting their joint assets while Evelyn was left to manage the household. It wasn't just an affair, it was financial abuse. "This isn't just about infidelity, Your Honor," Rebecca said, her voice cutting through the tension in the room. "This is about Mr. Whitman's systematic betrayal, not just of his wife, but of the trust they had built as a family. He has deliberately tried to drain their shared wealth to fund a new life, one that he planned to start without his wife or his children. The judge, who had remained stern but neutral throughout the proceedings, seemed visibly unsettled by the evidence. Alan's lawyer, once so confident, was now scrambling, trying to downplay the affair as a private matter that shouldn't impact the division of assets. But the photos, the receipts, the blatant disregard for his family, they were impossible to ignore. Alan's face was a mask of rage, barely able to contain his fury as Rebecca dismantled the life he had tried to construct. He had been so certain that he would win this battle, so sure that Evelyn would remain the silent, obedient wife. But now, his carefully curated narrative was crumbling. Evelyn felt the power shift. She had been through hell, emotionally and financially drained, watching the man she once loved become her worst enemy. But now, she wasn't just fighting for survival, she was fighting to reclaim her dignity and her future. Alan's team, realizing they were losing ground, tried a different tactic. They shifted the focus to the children, claiming that Evelyn's decision to stay in the marriage despite knowing about the affair made her an unstable influence on them. She knew about the affair for months, Alan's lawyer said, his voice dripping with disdain. And yet, she chose to stay, allowing her children to live in a household built on lies and deceit. What kind of example does that set for them? Evelyn's heart raced. This was the lowest blow yet, an attack on her role as a mother. But she was ready. "Your Honor," Rebecca said, stepping in before Evelyn could speak. "It's true that my client chose not to reveal the affair to her children. But she did so out of love, to protect them from the pain of knowing that their father had betrayed their family. Evelyn Whitman chose to put her children's emotional well-being above her own, and she has fought to keep their lives as stable as possible during this difficult time. Mr. Whitman, on the other hand, has shown no regard for his children's well-being, choosing instead to abandon them in favor of starting a new life." The words stung, but they were true. Alan's betrayal wasn't just of Evelyn, it was of their children, too. He hadn't fought for custody, hadn't even tried to be a part of their lives. His sole focus had been on his own freedom, and now, that selfishness was laid bare for everyone to see. Evelyn had remained silent for so long, but now she spoke, her voice steady and unwavering. "I didn't reveal the affair to my children because I didn't want them to see their father in that light. I wanted to protect them from the pain I was feeling. I thought if I stayed quiet, if I kept the family together, maybe we could find our way back. But I see now that I was wrong. Alan didn't just betray me, he betrayed all of us. And the only reason I'm standing here today is because I refused to let him take everything from me, from our children, from the life we built." Alan's lawyer shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tide had turned. The judge, visibly moved by Evelyn's testimony, nodded slightly, acknowledging the strength it took for her to speak out. Thanks for watching. To be continued on part 2. Coming soon.